So my next question will go to Muiwa. As a VAS provider, how do you deal with cybersecurity? First and foremost, in terms of user data, and in terms of the services that you deliver to your customers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As a VAS provider, how do we deal with data security? There are 7 layers of security in cybersecurity. We have the physical layer, we have the network layer, we have the application layer, the endpoint layer, we have the user layer, just to mention a few. So, for every data generated, and by the way, the common currency in IT world today is data. So data is very, very precious. Data must be guided jealously. So for every transaction, it depends on the sensitivity of the data. We are not dealing with credit card, and so most of the data are like public data. For example, somebody making a call or somebody sending SMS or short codes. These are public data that should be is well known, is in the public domain. So, but when we have that data, what do we do with it? For example, data in use. We have a database, it is encrypted. When not in use, it has rest. It's also encrypted so that somebody that does not have the right to see the data will not have access to it. Sometimes you have your flash drive and peradventure maybe you're in transit and you lock the flash drive. Somebody that picks it up should not be able to access the content of that flash drive because it is encrypted. You only have the key to unlock it when you want to access it. So there are different measures put in place to ensure that the data of every customer is protected, whether in use or at rest or in transit. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So over to my co-chair.
So the lead panel paper presenter. Oh, apologies. So the lead panel presenter for my session, that's the people session, made mention of the involvement of the people, which is a very, very key factor that I don't think we've effectively done in this part of the world. I mean, when policies are about to be put in place, there's a committee, it's been done for years and years, but you and I probably still feels like we're not part of it. Right? What measures or what recommendations will you suggest that government puts in place to get feedback from the end users like us? My question is to Dicky.
Critical network infrastructure and its importance to e-governance. So I want to start first talking to Chidi to ask that what are your thoughts in driving investments in communications infrastructure in Nigeria? And the second question is, how can this investment be protected?
Okay, so I mean, in the earlier panel where we talked about the infrastructure for e-governance, the telecom infrastructure, how it supports e-governance, I think we did highlight the criticality of those infrastructure to even help develop and sustain e-governance programs and solutions. Okay, so I think first is we talked around regulation, how the regulators themselves can actually encourage investments in this space. Look, I know there's a lot of data around how much capacity is sitting idle somewhere in Lake Area and the shores of Lagos, but there is still a lot that needs to be done. First of all, offloading that capacity inland. So, programs and schemes to make sure we're able to, bring that all those capacity inland and in country, up north, and everywhere needs to be encouraged. And there are a lot of things that the regulators can do and even government. We talked about things that will encourage sharing of facilities, which is where people who are doing tower codes, for instance, the infra codes, encouraging those models, just sustaining the ecosystem in that space and encouraging those models is very critical. And how do you protect these assets? I think that's perhaps one of the biggest things, because a lot of telcos or service providers are losing service, losing revenue, even goodwill. So in terms of them being able to sustain service. So I think that critical national infrastructure bill or the related activities around it to make sure it is passed into law is very critical. It's something that we have to do. Not just for telecoms, because a lot of adjacent industries around it that supports telecom. If you just focus on telecoms alone, you lose it, because we also have other service structures that need to be supported. Also, I was listening to the Nigeria Economic Fraud Forum last month, where they said something around cybersecurity and the losses that come around, which is a very critical side of the telecom infrastructure protection. It was so believable to hear that for the first 8 months of this year, they said Nigerian banks lost 9.5 billion in economic fraud, in electronic fraud. It was almost like it's mind-boggling how much money, So, as we're looking at the protection of these assets, we should also look at the physical, the cyber, and the human side. So I think that's more about the company.
All right, thank you, Chief. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll start with Cynthia. Is Cynthia here? You're representing. What's your name, please? Johnson. So as much as we have recorded significant success in the area of digital access and technology inclusion, I like to say that because we're not where we used to be 10 years ago. As much as many people might differ, that we still have lots of grounds to cover. What would your recommendations for strategies to actually drive infrastructure and cover these connectivity limitations that we have in some regions in this part of the world? Because noting that connectivity can serve as a baseline for many other innovations in the world and in this part of the country that we're in.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Existing electoral process. What do you think is the greatest challenge that we're facing in promoting technological advancement across government?
For individuals, corporate institutions, and also the government. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for letting me speak. Okay, so
we've been hammering a lot on the government. But we on the corporate side of it, we also owe it as our responsibility to ensure that we maintain the most high level of ethical practices in our day-to-day business dealings. I say this as a matter of fact because we've had the pleasure in my organization, Zorapol, of working with companies that cut across telco, the financial sector, and some top logistics companies here in Nigeria. And I can tell you that some of the things that you see there, it becomes the eyes. The less said about that, the better. But the thing is, we need to start making ethics a very, very critical thing in our day-to-day operations. We can talk about the government, we can talk about the infrastructure, but if the people that are managing this infrastructure and the people that are behind this e-government don't have the correct ethical mindset in place, knowing that everything they are doing is for the betterment of the country as a whole, you can continue to implement technology upon technology upon technology from now to 100 years, and nothing is really going to change. I mean, the election, I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
I guess we should still have one or two speakers.
Initiative is the only civil society organization in the discussion today, and I think the same thing applied last year. We were the only civil society organization, and somehow it seemed like civil society organizations are like the rebel fighters who are always tackling the government because the government is not doing this, the government is not doing that. But what I've come to realize is that actually it's a lot of collaboration. You know, the reason why civil society organizations will say the things that they say and do the things that they do is because the entire idea is to hold the government accountable. What is the role or what is the expectation of people in a technological-driven society? People want trust, they want transparency, they want accountability, and technology can make this happen. Technology can make this easier, right? We can have a society where people actually have trust in their governments, they have trust in the systems because everything is clear. One of the things that I thought I'll be able to highlight, because I thought I would have much time, is the issue of data protection and data breach. Some of the speakers in the previous panel sessions already. Much that can be gleaned from a person just by getting access to their data. And we've had issues with, prime example is online loan companies, where you get, I know there's literally everybody in this room has had at one point or the other text messages sent to them with threats saying that you're also going to be arrested alongside this person that you may or may not even know. So one of the things that is expected in a technological-driven society is trust. So I'm just going to hold it off with that. Thank you.
We need to look at technology from like a new perspective, like a complete overhaul. What we seem to have been doing is digitizing some parts of it, digitization of some other part where you have a series of processes, right? But looking at it from a completely new perspective to say, exactly, if we are looking from a really transformational perspective, right, that is the only time we'll get it right. If you are looking at the transformational perspective, you have to first start by educating the people on top, right? So they really understand why we're doing what we're doing. You know, your question is like, if in the 80s or maybe 90s you said, what would you tell a Nitel to have a better telephone? You want dialing tone on your phone, you want your box like junction to be fixed on time. But with GSM and the whole new, all of that does not even exist. Does not even exist anymore, right? It's a completely new platform. And yes, the process should have brought transparency. I think it still can bring transparency. There are a lot of very simple things that can be done. I mean, people ask questions like, why can't results be inputted rather than scanning a document? And I guess there are some things against that, I'm not sure. But the question I would ask is that, even as like a guide or a shadow, why can't we do both? And you say, okay, I scored 20 here, you will include 20. If somebody changes it to 200, then we can look at the actual document that was scanned. But yeah, well, like I said, the way we look at the entire thing, it needs to change from just going from analog to digital, right? If the process doesn't change, if the thought process behind it doesn't change, then you will still have these breakages in between.
So digital literacy is for all at this point, not just
especially from the top, right? Then you bring it down, but especially from the top, so everybody understands, right? If you understand that you are being watched, as in, if you know that really you can manipulate it, but you can't really manipulate it, but everybody knows you manipulated it. It may change the way you go about it. Right? Just like people say certain things they do in certain remote voting centers, that you can't do it in certain places because as you are doing it, you will be on channels news or somewhere. Right? So if they understand it from that perspective, then I think we'll start making progress, and we'll look for better ways to win voters than manipulating. Thank you. So just in the spirit of inclusiveness, we need to have the lady that Ms.
Just as the lead presenter mentioned, I think the number one thing would be to involve the people, irrespective of the kind of committee, subcommittee has been set up. Because we've seen what happened, especially in the startup space, where you see startups developing solutions and all of that. After getting seed rounds, the next thing you see is the startup failed. Then research shows that the main reason has always been people, the end users, are actually not involved. Yeah, 54 James just closed out recently, and you see. So I feel that's number one, is the head, is the people, and our approach really. I like to contextualize it. So my company, Opera Global Innovation, is an incubator and accelerator firm. And the focus primarily is to make sure that every stakeholders within the innovation ecosystem are involved in everything around the innovation development. And so we adopted the quadruple helix model of innovation, whereby you bring the government, people, government, academia, and I'm happy that Professor Roti is here. The University of Afemia University is hosting one of our innovation hubs. And the reason for all of these things really is to make sure that for every innovation that has been jumped out, the people, the academia, the government, the society is involved. So number one is to make sure that the people are involved. Number two is to also make sure that whatever jargons that we want to mention, it is being contextualized. The people that want to use it understand it. Even at the subcommittee or committees that we are, we don't want to involve a, let's say, traditional ruler in a committee to understand the feelings of this environment. And you are talking about artificial intelligence at the high level. He does not understand what that is. So in real sense, I feel the two things I would, of course, recommend is involvement of the people as it is, and contextualization of the jargons that we want to mention. I also want to, I think the last point I want to mention is that I always make reference to the Estonia, the e-government approach of Estonia, the e-Estonia. In one of the findings, the government published that within 1997, that they started their e-government journey to 2020, the e-government approach, the involvement of people in the e-government has actually saved up to 1,400 years of work life for people in that economy. So you can imagine the importance of involving people, involving community in the journey of becoming a 100% e-government or e-government set community. Thank you.
So the paper presenter said so much, and based on the question you are asking, you also mentioned that we are not where we used to be. There is an obvious improvement, but we have not gotten to the destination yet. So we need to be able to track our progress, right? And when we talk about what the people want, connectivity, first and foremost, I want something simple in terms of technology, not complex. Technology is meant to make our lives easier and not complex. Right? And so for where we desire to be, what are the measures we can put in place that are visible, that are smart, that we can be able to track the next 5 years, the next 10 years, so that as we make the progress, the milestones, we can identify where we are coming from, where we are now, and what we need to do. Okay, so even the advanced world, so to speak, they are not 100%. We don't have a perfect system yet. But the fact that they are almost there and they are far more ahead of us, it's a plus, right? So for us today now, if we are going to talk about the connectivity and getting to probably the unserved or underserved areas, the infrastructure is needed. We need the government to assist in the infrastructure. Somebody mentioned in the earlier session, we have the submarine cables here in Lagos. I need to take my traffic from Lagos to Abuja to Kano, beyond Kano. A few years back, I know, because we also manage a network, Kano services were unstable. Today, I can tell you, from Lagos to Kano is stable, but beyond Kano is a struggle. Port Harcourt 5 years ago was an issue. Today, I can tell you, transfer of service from Lagos to Port Harcourt is steady, but beyond those key locations, how do we ensure that there is stability of service? So it talks about infrastructure. It talks about protection of the existing infrastructure from vandalization and the likes. Thank you.
Pointed issues as well as solutions. And so I wanted to, ride on the presentation that was made by my colleague from Co-Creation Hub, talking about how we can work with people, work collaboratively to ensure that we have the right solution. So again, co-creation is central. It's very important that, and just trying to respond to one of the questions that came up earlier, right? We need to ensure that we're carrying out inclusive stakeholder mapping from the outset. Everyone's views and perspective are actually taken into consideration. You also need to consider phased interactions. So not just at the beginning, not just when we're trying to find solutions, but every step of the way. Like my colleague had mentioned, you start off by trying to understand where the challenges are, then you ideate, right? In ideating, you're working with stakeholders again. Once you have a basic prototype of what you want to do, whatever it may be, in the simplest form, it could just be diagrammatic representation. It's also important that you continue to interact with stakeholders, even beyond coming up with solutions for whatever challenges or all the challenges that you've agreed to address. And I want to point out that we're seeing our Honorable Minister, Dr. Bosun Tichani, actually take the right step in the right direction by ensuring that there is co-creation in developing the AI strategy. I think one of our speakers pointed that out, and I just want to emphasize that again. I think it's very important that as we develop solutions, especially from the government perspective, that we're taking into consideration public and private partnerships, and that we're leveraging them to ensure that we're addressing our solutions. In addition to that, there's a big question around what we're learning from other countries who have gone ahead of us, who are doing better than us. Today we heard about Estonia, and I think it's interesting to see that countries like Benin have actually collaborated with Estonia, and they are able to see improvements in their e-governance. There's increased interoperability of their systems, there's increased transparency, and there are lots of documentation on the internet as to how Benin Republic has grown. So there's that question: what can Nigeria learn from others? What can learning tours help us achieve? What can collaborations with these countries also help us achieve? And on a final note, I would say, how are we leveraging emerging technologies? There are conversations in this room about artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. These emerging technologies can help us to innovate and actually drive us forward towards achieving the results that we're hoping to see even faster. Not to take much of our time, I think I'll stop on this one. Thank you very much.